All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Nature Journal show. Today, we're going to be talking to Kirsten Croswell. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Marley. It's wonderful to be here.
Yeah, so originally I was reaching out to see who would be willing to talk about more urban nature journaling because I think that's such an important topic. And you responded and said that was something that you felt like you could talk about. Could you tell us maybe a little bit about your nature journaling and show us some maybe recent pages and tell us about some of the locations that you go to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think originally I had had this idea of nature journaling being kind of an out and away thing. And within the last few years, I've really started to connect with this idea of nature journaling more in my neighborhood. And it started off kind of as a chance to give myself a break from all of the technology that I had to use over the last few years and to get outdoors. And I wanted a way to kind of start capturing some of the stuff I was seeing. And so I picked back up a nature journal and started, looking at some of the stuff I would find out on walks
Hmm.
around my neighborhood. Including things like fungus. So this was kind of a couple pages I did.
Ooh,
Uh,
let me
yeah,
put you
last fall.
on solo layout there. Ooh,
Sure.
nice.
So all of these different types of fungus I found on walks just within a couple miles of where I lived. And I'd had this, I think, illusion of like, oh, fungi are these things out in the woods somewhere and you have to go and find them. And I was so surprised by how many different types there were, and it led me to start noticing other amazing things that were kind of going on in these little nature nooks kind of around town. In terms of locations that I like to go, I do obviously tend to go to a lot of urban green spaces, so local parks or trails. I'm really lucky to live near a couple wetlands here in the Portland metro
Mm.
area that are really adjacent to urban spaces. And I love getting to go and check in on those places and watch them change.
Nice. So just for people who don't really know, how big of a city is Portland? Just to kind of give an idea or the perspective. And do you live in the center? I don't really know Portland that well. Maybe just give us a little bit of a sense of like how urban are we talking? How big is this city? And what's it like in terms of urbanity?
Yeah, so I actually live in a suburb kind of just to the south of Portland. So but definitely not kind of on that wildland urban interface at all. It's
Hmm.
very much a neighborhood. There's streets and roads everywhere. The wetland I love to go journal is right off kind of the main road that runs through my town.
Hmm.
Portland's a pretty kind of mid-sized city. We're the biggest city in the state of Oregon.
Hmm.
Uh, and we do have a lot of these kind of larger green spaces, like Forest Park is probably the most well-known one. But there are all of these kind of smaller parks and smaller green
Mm.
spaces spread throughout the city.
Hmm. So is Portland like millions of people? I mean, could you? I wonder how many million people are in Portland. Maybe we should just Google that.
Yeah, let me look up the most up-to-date data on that really fast.
I think it would be cool to start, having. I've seen some people speak about urban birding and even like create these sort of like lists of like cities over a certain size. And like I met this guy who speaks a lot about urban birding and he intentionally he only goes birding in cities over a certain size. And I can't remember how many there are in the world, but his life goal is to like go to all of those cities and practice birding there.
I would love to be able to do an opportunity like that. I I love birding around town,
Nice.
and Portland has a couple kind of interesting ones. So Portland is actually about a little over 600,000 people in Portland
Okay,
proper,
okay.
but I want to say kind of within the metro area, it's closer to about 1 million people kind of in the
Okay.
greater.
Got it.
Yeah.
Cool. So what is something that you have learned nature journaling in these more urban places around Portland?
For me, it's just how much biodiversity there is in my backyard. There, like I was talking about a second ago, I love birding. And that's another thing that pops up really, really often in my journals is I'm keeping track of what types of birds I see and what types of behaviors they're doing. And I've come across species that I never would have guessed were
Hmm.
living that close. I mean, in my local city park, there was one time I was walking along and heard some robins doing some alert calls, decided to kind of go slightly off the main trail, and right there next to a picnic shelter was a juvenile barred owl just
Whoa.
like sitting on top of this little like bird shelter hung on a tree and getting to watch the robins like swooping it. And I would have never thought of something like an owl being, just living a couple miles from my house.
Yeah, that's really cool. Did you say barred owl?
Barred, Barred.
Wow, that's really cool. I just saw my first one of those, I think a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. Did you look up the information about them? Because they didn't used to be on the West Coast of North America.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so and it's actually I think it's actually related to the topic of tonight's episode. That's why I'm letting myself go down this tangent. But I think it has something to do. So they used to be on the East Coast of the US and Canada, and I believe that they didn't make it across until there was, I think, something about human created green spaces or human something about human alteration of the environment made it so the habitat that they required was less fragmented across the center of the continent, and that they've moved over and they're I think they moved over further north and are like coming down. The interesting thing though is at least I don't know about in Oregon, but in Northern California the problem is that they outcompete and actually kill the endangered spotted owl, which is a close relative. Did you hear about that part?
Yeah, so I had originally heard about that. There's a museum in Bend, which is kind of a ways across the Cascades from
Uh-huh.
Portland, but they have a high desert museum there that has different birds, and that was the first place I'd ever gotten to see a barred owl. It
Uh-huh.
was an injured one that they were taking care of, and there was this huge plaque about those interactions that they're having with spotted owls. And there is a lot of discussion now about how do we as humans handle their population getting so much higher versus this species that we are trying to really intentionally protect. I
Yeah,
haven't
it's
gotten to see a wild spotted
controversial.
owl yet. I would love to, but I think they're a little more shy and a little more non-urban.
Yeah, you have to be exactly. You have to be in the old growth. I think they like the old growth forest. Okay, well, that's a really cool thing that you are there other things that you've learned specifically from nature journaling in urban places besides being sort of surprised by the amount of biodiversity in nature that you can find? What else have you learned?
I think I've learned a lot about not having to worry so much about what my nature journal looked like. That I think when I first tried nature journaling, it was very much travel oriented. It was something I would do if I was going on a trip out
Mm,
to a national park or something like that. But now I've realized I can kind of just I actually have a little micro journal that I sometimes just throw in my bag. And it's
mm.
just, a tiny pocket size one with a mechanical pencil. And I can just sit outside for a few minutes and take some time to be present, and just how powerful an experience that is for me, getting to realize like, wow, there's all of this amazing stuff going on, and not being so keyed into my cell phone all the time, and getting to
Mm.
watch the first buds come in, and you know, not being so worried about the fact that my crow doesn't look like, a perfect illustration, but I'm capturing a lot more of that movement and the ways that they're interacting more.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like such an important one, being less worried about what your pages look like and having sort of um, a lower standard, I guess, of what a session might look like, because I think that can end up being a major mental obstacle for people is if they feel like they have to go do something special, go somewhere special, make a page that looks special, they can end up just procrastinating. I should be saying we because I've definitely experienced this problem quite a bit. So that sounds like a major lesson. That's really, really cool. Well, this leads me to the next question that I wanted to ask you, which is why do you think urban nature journaling is important?
I think that for a lot of us, and I can definitely say this for myself, that in recent years, there's been so much of this kind of connecting via technology. And I've personally felt more of a disconnection from my natural spaces. And nature journaling really allows me to slow down and to pause. That if I go outside and I'm taking these breaks outdoors, that it's not just, oh, I'm trying to set a personal record down this trail anymore. It's a sense of, wow, it's really pretty the way the light's coming in through the trees. Or, oh my goodness, just off the sidewalk, there's this amanita growing up through these oak leaves that are the size of dinner plates. And I never was taking the time for that I I thought, I have to go away to find nature, but it's growing in the cracks between the sidewalks
Mm,
and along the sidewalk and in the tree just outside, where I like to eat lunch. So,
cool. Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so I think next I'm curious to hear a little bit more if you could maybe describe your practice, like, if you have like a routine or a frequency or sort of anything about like what your sort of practice looks like. Maybe you could just give us a little idea of a little image of what that's like.
yeah. So my practice kind of varies a little bit from time to time. I'll admit I still probably do more of my nature journaling after I've come back indoors. The
Hmm.
rainy and recently a little bit cold weather here uh, made me not quite want to spend so much time outdoors, but I've been trying to get more in the habit of carrying a journal with me regularly. If it's a day where maybe I'm not working, I've got a little kind of zip up kit that I'll put my
Hmm.
journal in. I've got a handful of colored pencils, a pen, and I'll at least try to get lines down and to jot some of those notes in the moment, the things that I might forget if I'm, counting the number of something I see, whether it's a bird or measuring something, to say, oh, well, how big is this really? Because estimation is not always the easiest thing to do. And sometimes I think I tend to overinflate a little bit in my head how big something is. Uh, or to have that kind of comparison piece. And then I might go back and add some of the more details. And I like to mix up the colored pencils I carry with me, depending on the
Hmm.
season or kind of what I've noticed on recent outings. But in terms of trying to get in more pencil miles, like I mentioned earlier, just having something that I throw in my bag that goes pretty much everywhere with me. And when something kind of catches my attention, jotting it down. Yesterday, I was noticing that I had gone outside a few different times, and I noticed that once the sun came out, all of a sudden the birds, one, I was noticing a lot
Mm.
more of them, and they were behaving in different ways, and it started leading me to all of these questions. And so having that space to just kind of jot stuff down is So powerful.
Mm. So then it sounds like it sounds like part of your practice is having a small journal and carrying a mixed bag of colored pencils that changes by season. And then do you, when you come home later, do you build stuff up in a different sketchbook, or do you just add stuff to those same pages where you were taking notes and doing sketches when you're outside?
I would say now I do more of kind of just adding some of those last minute details, but
Hmm.
initially it would be I would just kind of take my non-photo blue pencil and just quickly kind of try to get general shapes down. I
Hmm.
would take a lot of reference photos, either
Hmm.
with my cell phone or with a separate camera, so that I could
Hmm.
come back. But more recently, I've been focusing a lot on the plants that I've noticed that do stay green through the winter months, things
Hmm.
like ferns or some of our trees. And so I started trying to build my kit around the colors that I
Mm.
was seeing and saying, I'm going to actually try to match this as best I can while I'm
Mhm.
actually out here in the field and taking my time there rather than waiting to come home to do it. Because I find that not only does it help me match it a little bit better, but oftentimes because I'm taking that extra time in the field, I start noticing new structures to things or the way things are arranged relative to each other, stuff like that.
Cool. And so do you though have multiple journals, or do you have just like one nature journal going at a time?
So right now I'm really working kind of in three of them. I have my
Mhm.
tiny pocket one, which I take everywhere. I have kind of my bigger one, and this is where a lot of my nicer work goes.
Mhm.
Uh, Kind of that sort of thing. And then I do have a an even bigger journal that right now
Mhm.
I'm using more for work. I'm trying to become a certified naturalist so
Oh,
that I can learn
cool.
more about local ecology and ecosystems and those interactions between us and the organisms we share our environments with. So that's really where my bigger journal's focused right now. But I use that for things that won't quite fit on a smaller page.
Okay, cool. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit more. It sounds like you're using nature journaling as a study tool for the I was about to say the California Naturalist Program, but I imagine it's not called that in Oregon. So are you using it? Could you tell us how you're using nature journaling as a studying tool? Because I don't think everybody is uses theirs in that kind of a focused way, and that's an interesting topic in and of itself.
Yeah, so I decided here we call the program, currently it's called the Oregon Master Naturalist Program through Oregon State University. And I wanted kind of a way to start personalizing some of the things I was learning. And so I started building, it's this one. I started building a bigger journal where I could connect kind of say different structures. So
I'm
these are
gonna
like
put you
different
on solo
habitats.
layout there.
Yeah. So
Whoa,
these were the
wow.
different strategy habitats. Obviously, for some of these, they don't necessarily exist, say, close to where I am.
Hmm.
Uh, Estuaries are a much more coastal environment, or the dunes
Hmm.
are not near where I live. So I had to use photos for those ones. But I wanted to start kind of connecting with, oh, well, this looks like my wetland in my backyard.
Hmm.
And it allowed me to start connecting what I was learning with a lot of the things I'd been working on in my nature journal.
Hmm.
And it also brings in a little bit of sketchnoting, which is something
Hmm.
I had done in the past quite a bit. So I would start using a lot of boxes and trying to put fun little icons to pull my eye to certain topics on the
Yeah, it
page.
looks really cool. It looks like you're making your own textbook, own personalized textbook for the class, which I wish everybody that did classes, I wish everybody doing classes like that would do something. I feel like it would be a much better way to learn. I taught a class for a botany society in the Southern California desert a couple weeks ago, and one of their members was nature journaling already, and she was trying to make it more of a established thing for people to use nature journaling as a study tool. So thanks for sharing your experience with that. All right, I think that the question that everybody always wants to know about is how you got started with nature journaling in the first place. There's always a lot of beginners out there, and they're always curious to hear about how other people got started. So maybe you could tell us the story of how you got started with nature journaling.
Yeah. So I would say my earliest nature journal, or what I would consider my nature journal, was actually trying to capture what was going on with plants that my family and I tried growing on our apartment balcony when I was a kid. That, there's in no way like detailed drawings. It's very loose that I'm trying to get a sense of, a basil leaf looks different from parsley or something like that, or a pansy. And it's rife with misspellings. But I was trying to track, like, oh, today this thing sprouted, or oh no, this one's got aphids. And from there, I started doing a lot more of nature journaling while I would travel, that it was something I'd pack up, my little sketchbook and my Crayola colored pencils when I'd go on trips. And I would sit there at night, in a campground and kind of try to draw trees or try to draw the landscape. And I kind of got away from that for a while. When I was teaching in the classroom, I was introduced to sketchnoting and got really into that, which kind of helped me embrace this idea of not being super worried about what my drawings looked like, that it was more about getting ideas down on paper and building those connections. And kind of in hindsight, I realized what I was doing is I was getting a lot more pencil miles in.
Hmm.
And with that, I started branching into some digital art because I wasn't really comfortable working with physical medium. I was one of those people who was very much like, oh, I can't draw. I'm putting stick figures in the corner, and really talked, I think, down to my abilities.
Mm.
And I started realizing, like, why be so worried about that? That the whole point was to really capture what I was learning and what I was noticing, and all the cool things that went with that. And so I discovered Wild Wonder and started kind of doing some of the online classes that John Muir
Hmm.
Laws would run, and got to attend a couple of conferences online. And it allowed me to kind of start rediscovering that, oh, nature journaling is something I can do here in this urban setting, that I can just go and, watch the crows for a few minutes outside and what they're doing, or try to capture the moss that's growing, on that tree over there, and
Hmm.
wondering, why is it that color right now? And it's different than it was before. And yeah.
Cool. It's really cool to hear how people come to it from different directions. Um, do you have any tips for people who are just getting started? It sounds, yeah, I'm curious what, from your experience of going through this path, what tips do you have for other people who are maybe also talking down to themselves and thinking that they can't draw?
I would say start where you are and find something that piques your curiosity. Just go outside and maybe set a timer. Say, I'm going to go out for 15 minutes and I'm going to find something that just looks interesting to me, and try to capture it with where you're comfortable. And then go do it again. And then maybe try it again in a week or so. And I think if you keep going back, especially if you can go back to the same spaces,
Mm.
that different things will pique your curiosity. And you don't need to be, I think, worried, especially when you're first starting out, about having, it doesn't need to look like a botanical illustration. That's something
Mhm.
that takes a lot of pencil miles, a lot of pencil miles. And that you can get so much kind of growth out of just trying and looking a little bit closer and noticing, oh wow, that fern leaf has a structure right there, and I never noticed that it kind of stuck out and curved like that. Or, oh, these leaves are arranged this way on this tree, but this plant over here has this different pattern. I also think it's important to remember that growth is not linear. And that sometimes you're going to try drawing something. I was working on a food web for my class last week and was trying to draw a coyote. And that is definitely kind of a growth edge for me. I do a lot of bird illustrations because I love birding, but I haven't done as many mammals. And so I've started to look at it more as an opportunity that I can say, oh, let me go try that, or let me look at this different thing.
Wow, okay, cool. Definitely some good tips in here. Okay, well, before the lightning round, maybe you mentioned ferns a second ago, so maybe this is a good time to talk about Fernheart Designs, your website. Could you tell us a little bit about what kind of stuff? I'll put the name of your website here, but there will be a link down below in the descriptions for people to check it out. What is your website about, and what kind of stuff do you do on there? Like, are you teaching, and what are you trying to do with that?
So Fernheart Designs actually started out as a place for me to post my digital art that I was doing, because people kind of in my circle had said, hey, you know, can you post that somewhere where I can see it? And I said, sure, okay. And I ended up picking that name because ferns are one of the most plentiful plants that I encounter when I'm out and about and nature journaling. And so it kind of has started to evolve, though, from a focus on digital art to nature journaling. I'm trying to do some more work kind of getting people outside nature journaling here locally. I got to lead my first nature journaling workshop with an organization here locally recently, which is really exciting. And we've got plans to hopefully do another one in June. And that for me is really exciting. I love the opportunity to have a space where I can engage with people online. But also I've noticed that going out in nature journaling, people will come up on me and just kind of ask questions about the practice, which is also really fun.
Cool. It looks like on your website, you have a blog, and one of the first tips is actually finding community. So maybe you could talk a little bit about community, what role community has played for you. It sounds like in person, it definitely feels different than virtual, but virtual sounds like it's played an important role for you as well, right?
Absolutely. So in person, a lot of the nature journaling I've done was either leading stuff in a classroom or leading stuff with kind of sponsored by local community organizations. I recently discovered on the Wild Wonder Foundation, though, that there is a nature journal club that's starting up here in the metro
Oh,
area.
nice.
So I'm
That's
really
so
looking
good.
forward to that, to connecting with other folks who are interested in kind of doing some of this work in person together. In terms of online communities, though, I already mentioned Wild Wonder has really been critical. I think having those opportunities to come together and to learn from people. I recently discovered the Nature Journal Educators Forum that meets weekly. And as I was getting ready to kind of host that first class, being able to hear from other people who are trying to lead these opportunities in their own communities, what it's like, the joys and the struggles that go with that, it really kind of put my nerves at ease to say, yes, I can do this, even though I very much feel like a beginner in many ways as a nature journaler. That helps. I also discovered the Nature Journal Club online, which is where you and I were able to initially connect on Facebook. And I love the opportunity to see all of the amazing things that people are seeing in their different, in a sense, their own ecosystems that are around their own homes and their communities and on their travels. And
Mhm.
getting to see the different places people are at helps me feel a lot more comfortable sharing my work and sharing my journey in nature journaling.
Cool. Well, you mentioned a bunch of really important resources. And so, for people who are watching and don't know about Wild Wonder, the Nature Journal Club Facebook page, and all of that stuff that Kirsten's mentioning, just go down to the description below. I'll put links. In addition to fernhartdesigns.com, I'll put links to those other resources because they are really important. Okay, how are you feeling? Are you feeling ready for the lightning round?
Let's go.
Okay. Let's hear you. Can you make a lightning sound?
Pew!
Nice. Okay. Where's my other lightning round banner thing? There we go. Okay, so first questions are just a short answer, or yes or no.
Okay.
Is coffee an essential art supply?
Not for me, but for a lot of folks.
Okay. Organized or messy?
Ooh, attempt at organization.
All right. Do you like to nature journal alone or with other people?
Both.
Does your family understand your art?
Yes, they're very supportive.
That's good. Snacks?
Always.
Okay. Are you a perfectionist?
Recovering perfectionist.
Yay, me too. Plants or animals?
Ooh, animals.
Ink or graphite?
Graphite.
Okay. Do you ever put art supplies in your mouth?
I try not to, but it's definitely still a nervous habit.
Yeah. As a kid, I used to have the most chewed up my pencils. I don't chew on them anymore, but I used to have super chewed up pencils. Would you rather nature journal the big picture or micro?
Oh, absolutely micro. So much going on
Okay.
in those details.
It makes sense for the ferns and everything. I can see that. Would you rather nature journal on planet Mars or in the deep sea?
Deep sea because there's more life going on down there.
Yeah, I've noticed nature journalers, most of the nature journals aren't super excited about the idea of going to nature journal on Mars, which is interesting. Fast or slow?
Slow.
What face do you make when someone walks up to you and says, "You are so talented, I could never do that"? Great one. Okay, so next ones for the lightning round are if you could nature journal with any historical figure, who would you want to nature journal with?
Um, I kind of would love to nature journal with Georgia O'Keeffe.
Mm, mm-hmm.
Just because like the work with the flowers and the details is just really interesting to me.
Cool. Great answer. Haven't had that one before, so that's a great one. If there were a nature journaling Olympics, which event would you compete in?
Integrated sketchnoting.
Nice, nice. Okay. Sounds fun. Um, if you were nature journaling next to those amanita mushrooms and somehow fell through a fairy portal, and you could only bring 5 nature journaling supplies with you to the fairy land, what 5 nature journaling supplies would you take with you?
I would take my paper journal,
Hmm.
a micron pen,
Which size?
probably a 005. I like the really
Whoa,
fine point.
okay.
Yeah, I
All
like the
right.
really fine point work.
Okay, so wait,
Uh,
all right, that's 2.
an HB graphite pencil,
Mhm,
my non-photo blue pencil,
mhm.
and a ruler.
Okay, no colors.
No.
All right, maybe the fairies have some cool, colorful supplies.
They've probably got some good
Um,
pigments.
yeah, okay, and then last one here for the lightning round is, which Harry Potter character do you think would be best at nature journaling?
Luna Lovegood, because she sees the
Oh,
world in kind of a magical way.
yes, she's one of my favorite characters. Great, that was an amazing, lightning round. Oops, I almost ended the recording, but I just need to make this lightning go away. All right, nice job. You survived the lightning round. Okay, so now we've got a couple sort of personal questions here. Um, what is your dream project? Like, if you could do any nature journaling or art related project, what would you do?
I think I would love to co-create a nature journaled guide of the plants and animals that live in the Portland metro area. And I would love to
Mm,
co-create it with other members of the community.
mm. That would be so cool. I feel like urban field guides, I've seen a few things that are kind of like that, but it seems like such a huge need. That would be really cool. Okay, let's see here. What do you think the future of urban nature journaling is?
I would love to see the future of urban nature journaling be seeing more people out doing that. That
Mm,
I have yet to encounter another nature journaler out in the wild, but I do have so many people come up and ask me what I'm doing and ask me about what I've seen and sharing with me the cool things that they've come upon kind of in the local areas or things that they've noticed, oh, have you seen the bald eagles yet? Or stuff like that. And I think that there's an interest, and I would love to be able to get, I think, that confidence that, yeah, anybody can do this. Anybody can be a nature journaler, and you can just do it, in your backyard, on your lunch break from work, outside your balcony or your back porch, right there.
yeah, that's so cool. I think that that phrase is sticking with me that you just said that you've yet to encounter another nature journaler in the wild, and I think that's such an interesting thing to think about, and it would be really beautiful if that were more common, and I know that the times even for me, and I've spent a fair amount of time in places where there's a lot of relative lot of nature journalers. It's still rare to run into someone, but it feels so exciting. Even seeing someone sketching, I saw someone sketching in an airport, or whenever I see someone sketching somewhere, I guess that's happened to me more. I always go up to them and it's so exciting to just be like, "What are you doing?" And then I've hung out with people while traveling before from just meeting them from the fact that they're sketching. So, it's really exciting.
I should say that that is specific to urban settings. I haven't seen one like in an urban setting. I have
Right.
seen people, doing like plein air painting and that sort of
Mm,
thing, which
okay.
I'm so jealous of.
Uh-huh.
I would love to be able to, go places and have all of that, but it's a bit hefty
Yeah.
in terms of the space for me yet.
I agree. It's a little the plein air is a lot. Um, okay, so I think that my last question is, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you think is really important, or maybe something like a question that I should have asked, or a topic that, and you can think about this for a second, but is there anything that we didn't talk about that you think is important to mention here?
um, I mean, for me, I guess the fact that urban nature journaling can lead towards stewardship opportunities
Mhm.
has been a big thing for me. So, because I wanted to be able to see some of the green spaces that maybe I wouldn't normally be able to access or might not go into on my own, including kind of going down into some of the wetland spaces,
Mhm.
I I've actually had an opportunity to do some surveys, and those
Hmm.
ones I do after I do post hoc. I don't want to
Hmm.
bring, my very precious journal out there into the
Yeah.
mud and all of
Hmm.
that, but it gave me the opportunity to see the wetland from an entirely different viewpoint, and it's like being in another world. It really
Mm.
is, and getting to see kind of how plants and animals are interacting in that environment. And that's actually going on one of those surveys and nature journaling about it was actually what brought me the opportunity to be able to run a nature journaling workshop then with that organization.
Mm.
And
Nice move.
yeah, I did not it was not planned at all. It was just kind of a, "Hey, here's this thing I did after today's event," and I went through, "Here are the things I saw, and here are the things I learned," and they reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you be interested in
Yeah,
doing this with
awesome.
our community?" And I said, "Sure."
Uh,
And I since got to do my first amphibian survey as well. Did not get to
nice.
see as much as we'd hoped, but I did
Okay.
get to walk across a beaver dam for the very first time in my
Oh,
life, which was harrowing and absolutely incredible. Just
wow.
like I was super worried thinking it's an unstable, unsteady surface, but as long as you've got a good walking stick, some waders, and maybe a hand to kinda help you across, it it is just absolutely amazing how steady those are and to get to see kind of how the water moves over them from that
Whoa.
viewpoint.
That's really cool. Um, so did you nature journal the beaver dam at all?
I did, it's
Uh-huh.
really tiny,
Yeah, I've only nature journaled
but
the beaver situation like one time and or two times, and they were also kind of small and stuff. I didn't have a great view, but I would love to see.
so the beaver dam's
Oh, is
up
that an
here.
overhead map too of the
It
pond?
is!
Whoa,
So
that's
that was
really cool.
I realized it's not quite as accurate as I'd like, but it's an overhead map of kind of the path we took through the wetlands, the salamander eggs we found, some questions I had, and then
Uh-huh.
one of the folks on our team had taken a picture
Yeah.
as we were crossing one of
Nice.
the dams, and so I was able to kind of use that as a reference photo
What is
coming back.
slurp? Is
Oh,
that a sound effect?
yeah. So one thing I've been trying to do a little bit more in my nature journaling is capture sounds a little bit more effectively.
Uh-huh.
In fact, although I'm not afraid to admit, even as somebody who loves birding, I didn't
Uh-huh.
really get a sense of where chickadee came from in terms of the sound they make until I started slowing down and doing the
Uh-huh.
practice of nature journaling. And I finally was like, oh my goodness, they really do say chickadee. And I love to count how many D's I'm worth that day.
Uh-huh.
How much, how many times they repeat that sound when I'm
Yeah,
coming through.
that's
Uh,
really cool.
but yeah, slurp was my word to describe the sound it was making when my boot would of my wader would get a little stuck, and I would
Mhm.
have to kind of pull my foot up and out of the mud because there's a lot going on there and a lot of fun
Yeah.
with the methane that kind of bubbles up sometimes when you step in a certain spot, you all of a sudden the water starts bubbling around your feet when you step and you're just like, "Oh my goodness, this is strange."
Wow, it looks like you really captured a lot of the sensory experience of being on that trip.
Yeah.
Have you did you see, Ivea's class from the last Wild Wonder Conference about nature journaling and stewardship? You did see that one?
I did, and, the Nature Journal Stewards hashtag is one that I love to check out. I love to
Oh,
see how people are using the practice of nature journaling to kind of connect intentionally with our interactions and impact.
uh-huh.
Um, and so, yeah, and I would love to do more of that. Right now, my schedule is a little bit prohibitive, but as the
Mhm.
weather improves, I'm looking forward to getting out and doing more stewardship stuff because there's some pretty amazing things going on kind of with ecosystem restoration and cleanup. I know my local
Mhm.
wetland has had some strange stuff show up in it, including
Mm.
scooters.
Whoa.
Yeah. So kind of getting to be part of those solutions, but also I think I'd love to kind of get to do more education around that and talk to people
Mhm.
about why it's important for all of us to take care of these spaces.
Yeah. Let me ask you this around nature journaling and these sort of stewardship um, roles or stewardship activities. Which do you think is I as far as I like to think a lot about, like, what the benefits of nature journaling are, like, what the actual, benefits are, and obviously and you mentioned this, and I think this is important for a lot of people that live in urban areas, but obviously nature journaling can be a really great, personal well-being practice. It can help us slow down, it can help us connect to nature, it can be meditative, it can be creative and artistic, it can help us learn, it can help us, like, learn material such as for your naturalist course. But I like to also try to spend a lot of time thinking about how nature journaling can make a difference in a world that, as we know, has a lot of problems or things that are not ideal. So it seems to me like in a lot of situations that the nature journaling can be beneficial as like two it has sort of two benefits like in a stewardship type situation. It can change though it can be like a learning tool or it can be a communication tool, a learning or like um I guess behavior change tool. So like for example, if the head biologist of a stewardship project decides to do some nature journaling, maybe they will notice something, or maybe they will like feel a different way about the work they're doing. Or the head biologist or someone else could do a nature journal page while they're doing the stewardship work. And then that could be used like on their social media or shown to the public. So, from your perspective, which do you think is more important like in these stewardship places, like the learning side or like the individual person who's actually doing the nature journaling, how it affects them and changes them, or the sort of using nature journaling just as like showing the finished pages as a communication tool?
I kind of feel like it's most effective when you have both.
Hmm.
That in terms of like the individual learning, I've seen a quote before that says something about, the more we know about something, the more we care about it.
Hmm.
And that when I've had this opportunity to go out into these wetlands and to see these spaces, and um, the one I led the nature journaling workshop in it's a former agricultural space, and so there's still a lot of debris left over
Hmm.
from barbed wire fences and those sorts of things, and that it for me it made me want to get out more and clean stuff up, and that
Hmm.
I started being more like, oh well, I can just bring an extra bag or something tied to my pack that I take out when I nature journal with my bigger kit, and just if I find a little bit of trash I can just throw it in there. And because I wanted these spaces to be cleaner for other
Hmm.
people too. But I think that ultimately, if we keep that learning to ourselves and
Hmm.
never take that risk of sharing it with other people, that maybe if we're willing to take that risk of putting our page out there
Hmm.
where people can see it, that something about it might pique their curiosity or might make
Hmm.
them more aware of something that they're like, oh, I could do something about that. I could
Hmm.
go help clean up trash, or I could go help plant some, native plants in this space. And I think that one without the other is never quite going to be fully powerful enough.
Hmm. That makes sense. So do you think how do you think that seeing a nature journal, so let's create like a hypothetical situation here. say you go to like a stewardship day at your local, what's this wetland called that you like?
So the Hedges Creek wetland is the one that's
Hmm.
closest to where I live. The other one's called Dawson Creek,
Hmm. Okay,
not the TV show.
Dawson's Creek, wasn't that a okay? Yeah, I thought that was a TV show. All right,
Yeah, the first time
so
I heard it, I was like, "Wait, it's called what?"
huh, that's funny. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's say you go out and for like a cleanup day or like a some type of restoration work day, and you create a nature journal page in your style, sort of like that beaver page that we just saw, talking about like what's going on, showing a map and some stuff like that. And then on the same day they also have someone go out that's like, I don't know, like an environmental journalist or something, that takes like some photos and writes up an article. How do you think, what do you think the difference is between, like, what if we there was like a test audience and some people that live in the neighborhood of that wetlands were like shown the nature journal page that you made, and some people were shown the article, and maybe the article has like, measurements of like how much heavy metals are in the soil or in the water or whatever, and like, information like that. What do you think is the difference between those two ways of like communicating about the stewardship?
I think a nature journal is always going to have a little more personal touch because it's gonna be also kind of a window into somebody's way of seeing the world, which I definitely think journalism can do as well. But
Mhm.
uh, I think that, if you're bringing, if I'm talking about the nature journal or the wetland in my backyard, that I'm I'm part of that community that's directly adjacent. And so if, people in my neighborhood might then see me coming around and, I'm better able to engage because we're both part of that same local community. We're all seeing the impacts of that and, able to speak to that more directly. Uh, and I think that nature journaling takes a lot of that, like, pause. Like, it takes a little more time and, you know, it it gives it that only you can nature journal this space in that way, in that moment.
Mhm.
That when I led the workshop, all of us were in the same space. All of us were able to see the same things, and yet every single one of us nature journaled something completely different. And we're focused on some totally different aspect. And so I think when you're able to kind of combine those pieces, that it gives you kind of this bigger picture.
Mhm. Mhm. Cool. Obviously, I have like a huge bias here, so it's like sometimes hard to ask questions like this. I mean, it's not going to be a perfectly objective or whatever, but it's interesting to kind of at least try to talk about it with other people. Um, and I think it would be really cool to have a uh, a more conversation about stewardship and nature journaling. Eve obviously has done a ton, and I know there are other people doing it as well. I think I interviewed her briefly about it one time on the Nature Journal show, but it almost feels like the kind of thing where getting a whole group of people together, who are doing nature journaling in those types of situations would be really cool, because it seems like one of the places where nature journaling is going to get tested, or like it's where the rubber hits the road, and where it's like, are we just in our backyards, painting like lilies and robins and kind of putting calligraphy underneath and then like calling it a day, or are we like actually saving the world or doing something about these endangered places? So I think it's going to be an area, hopefully, where we can see like what nature journaling is actually capable of.
I think that idea of, like, nature journaling and citizen science,
Hmm.
kind of the overlap of those two is going to become so critical,
Hmm.
uh, because we've had this massive decline in bird populations in the
Mhm.
United States, that even a bird that's super common, where I live, like the dark-eyed junco, that we've lost millions of them.
Mhm.
And that I think people who are taking the time to be present and really get to know a specific space and a specific
Mhm.
environment and ecosystem, that those people are better able to then kind of help us all hear the canaries in the coal mine
Mhm. Mhm.
and what's happening with that. And that I think when you have that integration of like data collection and stewardship and nature journaling, that has the opportunity to provide that meaningful information that we can then go out and say, hey, this is a problem that's going on,
Mhm.
and here's where we can individually or collectively take some action to kind of make those changes.
Mhm. All right. Well, I'm ready to go. I'm gonna get my mini nature journal kit and my boots, and I'm gonna go to the local wetland right now and see if I can pull out some invasive plants and nature journal it. Kirsten, thank you so much for coming on the show today. And let me put up your website here in case people want to see more of your work. And also on Instagram, you're also Fernhart Designs on Instagram, correct?
It's Fernhart Design without the S because they have a character limit.
Oh, okay. Fernhart Design on Instagram. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Marley.
All right, for everybody who's watching this at home, bye. See you next week.